Shana Tova. Good Yantiv. On October 7th, there's a story of two grandfathers who were taken in kibbutz near Oz by Hamas. They were not just taken hostage by themselves, but with many members of their family. One of them was Avraham Munder. He was kidnapped with his wife Ruthie, their daughter Karen, their only grandson Wahad, 9 years old. And the other was Yoram Metzger, father of 3, grandfather of 6. And Avraham Munder and his wider family, they were known for being quiet in the kibbutz. Them and their friends loved to get together for evenings where they would come together and sing the songs of the kibbutzim, the songs of old Israel that they'd all grown up with. The other one, Yoram Metzger, he was more of an extrovert. He had that Israeli spirit. In his family, they debated all the time. They were loud, they were talkative. Munder, the quiet one, when they came, he was trying to keep the door of the safe room closed. And he and his daughter and the grandson, they were all hiding inside the safe room. When they heard the terrorists come into the house, everybody froze except for him. And he just grabbed, 79 years old, the handle of the door with all his might to try and keep it closed. But of course, these rooms were not meant, they were meant for rockets, not for infiltrations. They had no locks. So they put him on his knees and took his family. And he and his wife were fluent Arabic speakers, and they were big peaceniks, big advocates for peace. And both of them, Munder and Metzger, he was 81 years old, they were larger than life Israelis. Both of them were paratroopers in the '67 war. Metzger was wounded in that war. They both also fought in the Yom Kippur War. They were both children of Holocaust survivors. They were patriarchs of their families, and they were pillars of the kibbutz. And in many ways, they were just day-to-day, regular people like all of us, trying to live their life. They loved their relatives. They loved the Israel that they grew up in, regular Israelis who danced and shared in life, good and bad, and sacrificed so much for their Jewish homeland, the generation that built the country. And both tried to save their families, but they were taken into the dark tunnels of Gaza. So last Rosh Hashanah, we were standing at this very moment. Unbelievable to think about that we had no idea what was about to happen. And there was a sudden change in all of our lives. Trauma for Israel, the Jewish people, an important event for the whole world. It's impacted our lives, small ways and larger ways, the lives of the whole Jewish world. But how it's affected us. We've experienced so many feelings, fear and sadness and astonishment and atrocity and pride and strength. As we stand once again on the cusp of another year, we're in a very different place than we would have expected. And we do have hopes for this year as we stand here at the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. We have national hopes for the Jewish people, the return of the hostages, please God, the end of Hamas and Hezbollah, somehow a means of changing the dynamic with Iran. Really just a restoration of the miraculous narrative of Israel as the Jewish homeland, the return to the Jewish homeland, the fulfillment of 2,000 years of dreams, of its attempts to live by the highest moral and ethical and spiritual integrity, and all the miracles of those years since then, the difficult times and the wonderful times. We just hope that narrative will be restored in hearts and minds in the Jewish people and in the wider world as well. And just an end to the fear of being Jewish, to stop fearing putting mezuzot on our doors and kippot on our head, and to stop fearing wearing stars of David on our necklaces, to not have to have enhanced security at every Jewish site around the world, every single site. Just normal, peaceful life. In the Bible, there's a beautiful expression that brings to those who are about to go into the land, and it says, you will come to that day when every one of you will be under your vine or your fig tree and just living life. Just simple, simple life. And for the Palestinians too, we also have hopes. The end of their terrible sufferings and the fulfillment of their dreams, a new beginning for them. A more united Israel, a more united United States of America. Simply more well-being, a year we each can just cherish our time as parents and children and grandparents and grandparents and spouses. So as we sit here thinking about the year that passed and the year ahead, we also have fears. Fear that the war will spiral out of control. We will not know, cannot know what will happen, even in just the days ahead. Fears that anti-Semitism and Israel hatred will increase, campuses and public schools, in our newspapers, in our very communities. Now, some have said that the golden age of American Jews has passed. And now we have to live like this, God forbid, misunderstood, back to being the Jew of history. Even though, as we know that even if this is how we have to live, we've discovered that whatever they say, whatever happens, we'll find a way to do it. We have it in us. Even if we lose our comfort, we lose our understanding, even our faith, we'll continue just like all those who came before us. We'll do what has to be done. And God forbid we have to spend a long time in that rock bottom place, a rock hard place. So if we characterize this year that passed, very difficult year, yet also the seeds of hope, new beginning. So we have a lot of healing to do and questions. How do we move forward from where we are? How do we make the next year different? And how are we going to heal? And through these days of awe, we're going to be talking about all of this. How to heal, how our anger can be lessened, our fears diminished, our hope and inspiration in our hearts sparked, our faith rekindled, and how to let this terrible year find its place within our being and create a new year. My wife Rachel is a psychotherapist, and everything in her field these days is about trauma, right? How to recover from trauma of this and trauma of that. And there's also a stream of thought that she shared with me that says that human beings, that we have within us unbelievable ability and resilience to live with difficult experiences with God's help, and to let them move through whatever God and life brings us, and to let that teach us and grow from it. And really, the entire story of our people is based on that very belief and thought. And so we have a lot of prayers this year. Prayers for Israel, prayers for the hostages. And we spent a lot of time in this room over the past year going back to prayers from the Middle Ages about captives that we thought we'd never have to really think about in the same way again, but have become part of our reality. Prayers for this nation at another turning point for the whole world. Really, every year we go through this, but this year it feels all the more real. because there's so much of balance for the whole world. We're in a moment of change, of uncertainty, and hopefully of opportunity. And even for ourselves, as we do every year, how we can order our hearts and minds and do all the work that we each feel we need to do to grow as human beings, to bring that for our families. Because really the core of these days is to give forgiveness and to ask for forgiveness from people in our lives, from our community, for our loved ones. The power of prayer is what we spend, is our main task, what we do in this room over so many days of the holidays. And it's attested by a story we'll read tomorrow in the Haftarah of Hannah. Hannah could not bear children. She was one of the matriarchs who was barren. And every year she used to go up to the tabernacle and pray for a child, year after year. But one year she prayed so hard that the high priest thought that she was drunk and rebuked her because her lips moved, but there was no sound. There was just this powerful and quiet prayer. He rebuked her, but then when he heard her story, he thought, surely such a prayer can only be heard, can only have an effect. And then a son was born to her out of that, who would become one of the greatest prophets of Israel, who did his best to guide Israel to their highest ideals and aspirations and convey godly conduct in all their ways and drill into their hearts and minds. They did not have to be like everyone else and to lead the people by the will of the divine. This year we also have great pride. Great pride because even as we went through this moment of terrible trauma, there are so many powerful stories. Israelis who poured in from across the world, filling planes. Young Israelis who were in their 20s whose counterparts only had to do what you should have to do in your 20s, which is build your career, find out who you are, meet somebody. And they were boarding planes and putting on gear, military gear that was donated to them to go straight to Gaza to fight ruthless terrorists. They say 40% of all Israelis volunteered in those first few weeks. 40% volunteered and did something in the community to help, give of their hearts. And those same organizations that the year before were blocking highways because they were protesting against the judicial overhaul, suddenly use their networks to organize and get provisions and gears to soldiers. There are also many stories like those of Itamar Ben Hemo. He's a 49-year-old who worked in the high-tech area industry in Tel Aviv. And before October 7th, he had just raised $49 million for his startup. And he had employees all around the world, in London and in New York. And not sure I understand what his company did, but something to do with client data. And his customers were some of the biggest companies in the world, BuzzFeed and Bayern, the pharmaceutical company. But when October 7th happened, 49 years old, his hair all gray already, he had some combat experience in Lebanon, and he thought he could somehow help. And so he told his senior management, I'm not sure when I'm ever going to come back. But he left, put on his old gear, he'd been a major in the army, and got all his troops together and went into Gaza. So he put aside the restaurants of Tel Aviv, the company of his wife and 4 kids. For the first few days, he helped communities evacuate from the south. And then he spent 3 weeks training them to enter Gaza. And then he would go in and out of Gaza, destroying tunnels. And in between, he was on his laptop doing Zoom meetings like everybody else. And his sale team got their biggest sale while he was away, a war. And then one day, his unit was ambushed by terrorists with RPGs and firing bullets all around. And some of the bullets got in between the armor and into his organs and ended up in the hospital. It did not look good. Thank God he survived. And he woke up from his coma and there were his wife and his children. He squeezed their hand. And said that one of the first meetings with his investors, at first he didn't even want to talk about what happened to him. But they pressed him. So he shared a little bit, and then he says, I don't want to share anymore. Let's move on. This is cheesy. So we've also seen these amazing stories of courage and of self-sacrifice. As we stand here, beginning of a new year for us, this moment for the world, really what is at stake is what is going to be the vision that we're going to follow for ourselves and for the whole world. What's going to be the vision? Will it be that spirit of the two grandfathers of Mundell and Metzger, who sacrificed so much, and they gave so much, and they found greatness, and they held on to the belief in peace and the highest values, the spirit of all those who dropped everything for their nation under fire, because they believed in an image of service to one's community and nation. And that beautiful, romanticized, but much of a true image of the kibbutz, a place where people come together and are living in community, everything to share, everything for the collective, with that passion and that truth, and believing that there you find peace and well-being. And the ideas of the startup nation, people whose creativity and chutzpah took them to conquer the world from a country without natural resources, even as they were a few times a week dropping everything to protest so that their country looks ever more like a place that's welcoming to all of its inhabitants and a place of high ideals of democracy and ethics, what our Jewish civilization is all about. Really the vision of all those here in America, because so many here have also been doing what they can, dividing so many hours to defend Israel and speak up for our children's future, and to fight misinformation, and to fight lies, and to fight for a vision of life where everybody is deserving of empathy and truths are complex. To have a broad mind and a broad heart. That's what the vision is, a broad mind and a broad heart. Because the other vision is of a narrow mind and of a narrow heart, and fear and vengeance and anger. And there are those who are trying to awaken those negative forces within humanity and those emotions within all of us. And so we sit on the cusp of the year to find healing and to think how we can in our own way bring that vision of a broad mind and a broad heart into our own lives, into our community, for Israel, for the world, to pray for it, to heal, to think, just to sing, to find some answers to our questions this difficult and challenging time. So those two grandfathers, Metzger and Munder, the quiet one and the loud one, who were witnesses and participants in the story of Israel, right? The fulfillment of the dream. They were part of that. The dream that was also just a reality, daily life, two good people living good lives. As we say in Israel, the greatest compliment is salt of the earth. A country where it was founded by pioneers working the land, coming back to a land after 2,000 years. So many gave. Salt of the earth is the highest compliment. So those grandfathers were taken hostage. Their bodies were found in August, even as all of their other family members were rescued, were released earlier in the year. So their bodies were laid to rest in kibbutz near Oz, still devastated. And there they told everyone to be careful, that if the air alarm went off during the funeral, they had to get down and lie flat on the ground. The person who said this, knowing how Israelis are, said, not pleasant, but friends, chevre, it saves lives. So we pray for them and for all the others, and we set our hearts and our minds to walk in the year ahead by their vision, a vision of an open mind, an open heart, a wide heart, and a wide mind. The beauty of their example and the vibrancy of their lives. Erev Tov, Shana Tova.